The title of today's presentation is part of the second lecture of the public health microbiology with the title Waterborne Parasitic Diseases. This presentation is aimed at assisting the student to be able to recall the important point discussed during our classroom lectures. Now, there are four major types of animal parasites that are significant infectious agents of waterborne diseases in man. These categories of parasites include number one, the protozoans, which are the single cell animals belonging to the phylum Protozoa. The second category are the nematodes, which are otherwise called the roundworms, belonging to the phylum Nemathelminths. The third category are the trematodes, which are otherwise called flukes or non-segmented flatworms, belonging to the phylum Platyhelminthes. And the last category are the cestodes, which are the segmented flatworms belonging to the phylum Platyhelminthes. Now, for each of these parasites categories, we'll try to look at their mode of transmission, the form in which they are transmitted to humans, and the type of diseases they cause, the symptoms of the diseases they cause. Now, taking the first category, which are the protozoans. Protozoans generally cause dysentery-like diseases, and they are generally transmitted through drinking contaminated water containing the cyst of the parasites, which originate from the fecal matter of an infected individual. Upon ingestion, then several symptoms will result. So the first parasite, and one of the most common, is the Entamoeba histolytica. Entamoeba histolytica causes a dysentery diseases, which is called amoebiasis or amoebic dysentery. The parasite is generally transmitted by drinking contaminated water containing the cyst from the feces of an infected individual. So generally, the feces from infected individuals that contaminate water bodies are ingested. They are ingested together with the contaminated water, and then upon ingestion of the feces, the symptoms of the disease result. Now, the most common symptoms include mild abdominal discomfort with diarrhea to acute bloody diarrhea, fever, and chills. Moving to the second category of the parasites, under protozoans is Balantidium coli. Balantidium coli causes a disease known as balantidiasis, which is also a dysentery disease and is otherwise called balantidial dysentery. Now, this particular disease is transmitted the same way as amoebiasis through ingestion of the cyst of the parasites via contaminated water bodies. And symptoms of these diseases include diarrhea, sometimes with blood, abdominal cramps, nausea, and vomiting. The third type of protozoa is Giardia lamblia. Giardia lamblia cause diseases referred to as giardiasis. So if you look at the name of the diseases, usually the diseases are named after the generic name of the parasite. Entamoeba histolytica, amoebiasis. Balantidium coli, balantidiasis. Giardia lamblia causes a dysentery-like diseases, which is called giardiasis. Giardiasis is an infection of the small intestine. The parasite is transmitted also through contaminated water, by drinking contaminated water containing the cyst of the parasite. Now, symptoms of the disease include chronic diarrhea, which is often pale or greasy or malodorous, and then abdominal cramps, of course, bloating, excessive fatigue, as well as weight loss. Now, the third category, the fourth category, which we are going to talk about, the Naegleria fowleri and Acanthamoeba species. I decided to combine this together because they cause neurologic diseases. These parasites called neurologic diseases, which is called amoebic meningoencephalitis. The disease is transmitted through invasion of the nasopharyngeal area by the trophozoite from contaminated swimming pools. So it's a disease that is also transmitted through contaminated water, but in this case, it is not through ingestion of the water, but the disease is transmitted when the trophozoites in contaminated water penetrate the nasopharynx of man. So immediately the parasite penetrates, they travel around the body, leading until they reach their destination, which is the brain. So these parasites generally cause inflammation of the brain, severe frontal headache, nausea, vomiting, severe hemorrhage from the nasal passage, where they enter initially, and then usually death occur in the 5th or 6th days of the infection. So it is important to note that the first 3 parasites mentioned causes dysentery, which rarely kills, with medication, but the last 2 parasites that cause neurologic diseases, they easily kills the infected individuals within 5 to 6 days or 5th day. Now, the second category of parasites we'll try to look at, as we said, there are 4 categories. Now we have seen the examples of the protozoans. Now we'll try to look at the second categories, the roundworms, which are the nematodes. Now, nematodes, unlike the protozoan parasites, they are not transfer directly to humans. The parasite do not, they are rather indirectly transferred to humans. So they require they require another host. They require another host, which is called intermediate host. The parasite requires an intermediate host to be transmitted to humans. Intermediate host means that the parasites, when discharged from infected person, they get into another organism and develop. Then after developing, the parasites lead to the establishment of the disease. Now, the first group of roundworm we'll look at, which is very common, is the a roundworm called Anisakis marina. As the name implies, this roundworm is generally found in marine environment. This particular roundworm is transmitted by ingestion of contaminated marine fishes. It is responsible for the disease known as anisakiasis. So it causes a disease which is called anisakiasis. It's also a gastrointestinal disease. And as we said, the intermediate host, we said nematodes are transmitted through intermediate host. So this particular nematode is transmitted through the intermediate host, which are the marine fishes. So people eating marine fishes are at risk of this particular diseases. The symptoms of these diseases include fever, acute nausea, vomiting, and abscesses or granulomae in the walls of the stomach or small intestine. As we said, it's a parasite that attacks the gastrointestinal tract. So when it forms abscesses in the walls of stomach or intestine, it leads to vomiting, fever, nausea, and so on. Now, the next one we'll look at, which is also common, is the Angiostrangulus cantonensis. Angiostrangulus cantonensis. Angiostrangulus cantonensis is a parasite that is commonly referred to as the rat lungworm. Rat lungworm, because it is generally found in rats, and therefore the intermediate host for this particular parasite is rats. It is responsible for a disease known as angiostrongyliosis, just as from the name of the parasite. Most of these parasites, their diseases are named after the name of the parasite. Angiostrongyliosis. This is a disease of the central nervous system, which is characterized by severe headache, stiffness of the neck and back, temporary facial paralysis, and low-grade fever. The only lucky part for this particular disease is that it is really fatal. It doesn't kill, but it leads to those symptoms. Now, angiostrongylus adult, as we said, they are found in the lungs of rats, which serve as their primary host. And then the larvae of this rat are expelled together with the sputum of the rat. And when these larvae find their way into water bodies and ingested by any of the marine organisms, and then finally by human beings, the diseases occur. Therefore, the infection for man is through ingestion of the contaminated water organism. So the intermediate host is the marine organism, but the main source of the parasite is from the rats, lungs. Now, the next group of nematode, which is also very common, is the Dracunculus medinensis. Dracunculus medinensis meaning little dragon of Medina. Dracunculus means little dragon. Medinensis from Medina. So little dragon from Medina. It is also commonly referred to as guinea worm. This particular parasite is very common. It is responsible for the disease known as dracunculiasis or elephantiasis. The disease is called elephantiasis because it produces symptoms in patients in which you'll see one of the legs or both legs, both affected legs swell and accumulate a lot of tissues growing into like elephants. And that is why the disease is named elephantiasis. Now, the intermediate host for Dracunculus medinensis or guinea worm is the freshwater crustacea, commonly the cyclops. So the cyclops are the intermediate host from which the humans get infected. Therefore, transmission of these particular diseases is through drinking water containing the contaminated cyclops, the cyclops that contain the parasite. In the cyclops, the egg-bearing female migrate to the subcutaneous tissues and subsequently to the skin, where ulcerated lesions occur in the infected person. And then during contact with water, when the infected person become in contact with water, the lesions of the infected person discharge the larvae. The larvae are expelled by the lesions of the infected person, where they get ingested by the crustacean, where they develop into adult worm, and then when the crustacea is ingested by humans, the cycle repeat itself. They will grow and produce eggs, and then the eggs will now hatch into larvae, which will produce lesions. Then from the lesions, the larvae become discharged in water. Now, the therefore, the symptoms of dracunculiasis include uh, skin lesions, which are primarily found on the legs or arms, then together with burning and itching in the area of the lesions, and frequently fever, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. They also elicit this kind of diarrhea-like symptoms. In some cases, when the worms when the worms are being removed, because you'll see the worms once in contact with the water, you'll see the worm trying to come out from the lesions. So while trying to remove the worms, if they breaks, the toxins are discharged from the worms, and those toxins will now causes the ulcerations, abnormal growth, and cancer. They cause the cancerous growth of the affected leg. So the legs will grow, swell bigger, similar to that. You'll see very big. That is why it's called elephantiasis. The legs become very, very, very big in those type of individuals while removing the worms. So removing the worms from the infected area has to be done with extreme care in order to avoid uh, elephantiasis from occurring. Otherwise, the disease will just present the symptoms, the burning, itching of the area, nausea, vomiting, and so on. Now, the next group of parasites, which I try to combine them into two, the Capillaria species, Capillaria hepatica and Capillaria philippinensis. These Capillaria species are generally called the whipworms, and they are generally parasites that cause liver diseases. They cause a disease which is known as hepatic capillariasis. The other one, Capillaria philippinensis, cause intestinal capillariasis. So they generally cause uh, capillariasis, which is inflammation and destruction of the cells of the liver or the intestine. Now, in the case of these worms, the adult whipworms they are found in rats. They produce eggs. Uh, when they produce eggs, the eggs remain dormant within the body of the rat. The main source of these worms are rats. So adult worms in the rat produce eggs, and then the eggs will remain dormant. They will remain dormant in the rat body until when the rat died. So when the rat died, when the rat dies and decompose, the eggs are discharged, and if they found themselves in nearby water, maybe during rainy seasons, if they are washed and they found themselves in water, they contaminate the water bodies. So once they contaminate the water bodies, the eggs will now embryonate in the water bodies, and then upon ingestion, embryonate means they will now reactivate from the dormant stage. So upon ingestion by humans, the eggs will now hatch into larvae, which will develop in the intestine. Now, in the case of Capillaria philippinensis, the larvae remain within the intestines, where they establish the intestinal capillariasis, which is infection of the intestines. While in the case of Capillaria hepatica, this particular parasite has affinity to liver tissues, so it travels by way of circulatory system together with food substances transported to liver via the hepatic portal vein. So on reaching the liver, the parasite will now stay in the liver where it establishes the hepatic capillariasis. So this particular diseases is generally now the next group of parasites we need to talk about are the cestodes. Cestodes, as we said, they are segmented flatworms. They are flatworms that have various segments in their body. So they are generally segmented flatworms, and this cestode, usually most of them cause infection of the intestine. So their infection is mostly intestinal infection. Now, the first of this category is a flatworm called Diphyllobostrium latum. Diphyllobostrium latum is very common, and it is the largest tapeworm that can grow up to 10 meters in the small intestine of humans, with about 2.5 centimeter in width, and it can contain over 4,000 segments. As we said, this segmented flatworm, so it can contain over 4,000 segments. So imagine the amount of nutrients this particular worm can consume in the small intestine. So it is generally responsible for the disease known as diplobosteriasis, which is an intestinal disease. It is a disease of the small intestine because the worm stay in the small intestine. Now, as it stays in the small intestine, the adult worm in the small intestine produce eggs. In the course of the transmission, the adult worm produce eggs in the small intestine, and these eggs are now expelled together with feces, human feces. And once the eggs found themselves in water, they embryonate, and if they are ingested by freshwater crustacean, the cyclops, the eggs will now hatch into procycoid larvae, which is an immature larvae. Now, one thing I didn't mention about cestode is that they usually require 2 intermediate hosts, unlike the roundworms, the nematode. Nematode require only 1 intermediate host. This group of parasites require 2 intermediate hosts. So cestode, the procycoid larvae will now remain in the cyclops. Once the cyclops is ingested by other aquatic organisms such as fishes, the procycoid larvae will now develop into plerocycoid larvae. So the fishes or other aquatic organisms represent the second intermediate host for this particular parasite. So the procycoid larvae will develop into plerocycoid larvae in the fish, which is the infective stage that can infect humans. Therefore, human beings become infected by the parasite when they eat contaminated fish, a fish that contains the parasite. Once ingested by man, then the parasite will get into the small intestine, and when they get into the small intestine, the fluorocycoid larvae will now develop into an adult worm that will continue to grow in the small intestine, consuming a lot of nutrients, and therefore resulting in several symptoms such as abdominal discomfort, weight loss, because it consumes a lot of nutrient, making the person to have a kind of starvation in the midst of plenty. You are eating a lot, and the nutrients that has been digested, that is ready to be utilized by the body, will now be used by the parasite instead of the body, and therefore the person will experience weight loss of appetite, and sometimes even anemia, shortage of red blood cells, because red blood cells requires nutrients. So if there are low nutrient in the body, anemia will result, and also neurological problems can be observed if in heavily infected individuals. It can lead to neurological problems. You know, brain is most affected by the shortage of nutrients. So once there is shortage of nutrients, neurological problems can occur in the infected person. Now the next parasite we'll talk on the Echinococcus species, Echinococcus granulosis and Echinococcus multilocularis. This type of worms, I combine them because they cause a common diseases, and this type of worms are very short in length compared to the Diphyllobothrium latum. They have very short length, usually less than 6 millimeter in the body. So they are the shortest. They are considered the shortest tapeworms. They commonly cause a disease condition known as hydatidosis or hydatid cyst. Now, in the course of the transmission, the eggs from infected person, when they get into they contaminate food, they contaminate water or vegetables watered by the polluted water. So when they contaminate either food or water, they become ingested by man. When they become ingested by man, then the eggs will now hatch into larvae. When they hatch into larvae, because of their small size of the body, their small body size, these particular worms can move freely within the circulatory system and spread to various parts of the body where they produce cysts. They attacking various body parts. Therefore, they produce lots of cysts in the body parts, especially in the liver, in the lungs, and less commonly in the kidneys, heart, bone, central nervous system, thyroid, etc. So, in fact, no body part is exempted. No body part is exempted from uh, uh, hydatidosis. No body part is exempted. Therefore, the symptoms of hydatidosis depend on the location of the cyst in the body. So we may have a situation whereby the symptoms are not even seen, non-existent symptom, and we can also have a case in which the disease leads to death. It can be fatal in the case where it affects important organs such as the heart, the brain, uh, and so on. So now let's look at the next parasite. Now The last category of the parasite we'll talk about are the trematodes. Trematode, which we said they are called the flukes or the flatworms. These worms do not have segment in their body, so they are different from the cestodes. The cestodes have segment, while these ones are called unsegmented or non-segmented flatworms, and they generally infect the intestines. And one thing about them, these trematodes have a common life cycle. They generally have common life cycle, uh, which start with the adult worms that are found in man. The adult worm produce eggs. When they produce eggs, the eggs generally discharge from the body through the feces or urine or sputum of the infected person. Now, once the eggs get in contact with water, they become active. They embryonate and hatch into Miracidium larvae. Now, this Miracidium larvae will now penetrate the body of the next host, the intermediate host, which is usually the freshwater snail. So it will penetrate into the body of the snail, and once it penetrates into the body of the snail, the Miracidium larvae will now develop into sporocyst. The sporocyst will subsequently develop into radia larvae, and then the radia larvae will develop into Saccharium larvae. So all these stages take place in the snail. That means eradication of the snail from the water will help in controlling this particular parasite. Just like the tapeworms, if you eradicate the cyclops, it helps in eradicating the worms, because their life cycle is incomplete when you remove the intermediate host. That is why the control is usually targeted at the intermediate host. So the Saccharium larvae will now penetrate the skin of the first intermediate host, leaving the intermediate host. It will now infect another aquatic organism, which will serve as the second intermediate host. So it will enter into the next aquatic organism, such as the fishes, crayfishes, and so on. So when it gets into the second intermediate host, it will now develop into Metasaccharium larvae. Metasaccharium larvae is a matured Saccharia which have the ability to infect human beings. So it's the adult worm that can infect human beings, and then so human beings become infected generally through ingestion of the Metasaccharium larvae in fishes or other aquatic organisms. So after ingestion, the adult worm, the Metasaccharium larvae, will now develop fully into adult and then produce eggs that will be expelled in feces and urine, and then the cycle repeat itself. Now, the first group of this trematode, which is very common, is the Colonochis sinensis, or sometimes called Opistochis sinensis. Colonochis sinensis generally causes an infection of the liver. It causes the disease of the liver. So it causes infection of the liver, which is called colonochiasis. This disease is characterized by loss of appetite, diarrhea, and swelling of the liver. However, this particular disease is rarely fatal. It doesn't kill, except in some cases, but it can last for
30 years in the body. So the worm can last for 30 years in the body. Now, during the course of the transmission of this particular diseases, the eggs of the liver fluke, this worm is otherwise called liver fluke because it infects the liver. So the eggs of the liver fluke are passed from man together with species, and then the second intermediate host from which man become infected is the fishes. So fishes represent the second intermediate host. So the infection is acquired by ingesting contaminated fishes. Now the second one under trematode is the Echinostoma species. Echinostoma species are commonly called Echinostom flukes. These particular worms are responsible for intestinal diseases, which is called echinostomiasis. Echinostomiasis, as I said, is a disease of the intestine. Now, the parasites usually live and attach themselves to the wall of small intestine, where they produce inflammatory reaction and ulceration. So by producing ulceration, it leads to diarrhea because they alter the force in the small intestine, leading to backward flow of water into the intestine, and then it leads to diarrhea. So generally, the second intermediate host from where the man get infected is through ingestion of the second intermediate host, which are generally the freshwater snails or other mollusks. So the second intermediate host for this parasite are the snails and the other mollusks. Now the next parasite under this category is the Fasciola parasites. Fasciola hepatica, or commonly called the sheep liver fluke, because it's generally found in the sheep, and Fasciola gigantica, or giant liver fluke. Now, these parasites, I combine them together because they commonly cause a disease condition affecting the liver, which is called fascioliasis. So they cause a disease condition known as fascioliasis, which is an infection of the liver leading to symptoms ranging from subclinical, a mild infection, to severe cirrhosis of the liver and possibly death in severely infected individual. The transmission of these diseases usually is by consumption of contaminated vegetables. The eggs, when they are passed together with feces, feces of infected person, the eggs from polluted water, when they are passed together with the feces, they penetrate into the snail, which is the primary host, and then develop into miracidia, and then the miracidia will now go through the sporocyst stage to the radial stages, and then it will be elaborated as the Sarkaria. You know, we said they have to reach into the Sarkaria stage before they can infect human beings. Now, this Sarkaria will insist they become into cysts, which usually during watering of vegetations, these cysts are deposited, become attached to the vegetation, and when the vegetables are ingested by man, the man develops the diseases because the worms will now grow in the body of the man, and it will lead to the development of the diseases. Now, the next group in this category of parasites are the paragonymous species. The most common ones are three. We have the Paragonymous westermani, Paragonymous africanus, Paragonymous stejuanensis. Paragonymous species are generally referred to as the lung polyps. They attack the lungs, causing a disease known as paragonimiasis, which is an infection of the lung that is characterized by fever, severe cough, fibrous lesions, which can last for several years if untreated. So it can last for this disease can last for several years if it is not treated in the body. Now, during the transmission of these diseases, the eggs of the worms are expelled in the sputum of the infected person. And then the second intermediate hosts from which the man become infected are the crayfish and freshwater crabs. These are the second intermediate host. So human infection results from eating contaminated crayfish or freshwater crabs, and then the disease condition will now develop. Now the last group in these parasites are the Schistosoma species. Schistosoma mansoni, Schistosoma hematobium, Schistosoma japhonicum, Schistosoma intercalatum. All these parasites collectively cause the infection of the bladder and intestine, which is referred to as schistosomiasis, or commonly referred to as bilharzia. This infection is a long-lasting infection, but it is rarely a fatal disease that produce minute scars in the affected organs where the worms become lodged. In the case of Schistosoma mansoni, Schistosoma japhonicum, and Schistosoma intercalatum, these worms are responsible for the intestinal diseases producing the clinical symptoms, whereas the Schistosoma hematobium result in the urinary tract infection. It produces eggs, which affects the bladder, leading to blood trickling from the urethra, which can be noticed after urination. Now, this particular infection is usually acquired through physical contact with water containing the Saccharium larvae. The larvae penetrates the skin. On contact with the body of humans, the larvae will penetrate the skin. So this Metasaccharium larvae, it penetrates the skin of healthy person, and then when it penetrates the skin, it gets into either the intestine or the bladder, where they lay eggs. They produce eggs. Now these eggs are passed together with feces and urine, which will finally find themselves back to water bodies, where they develop into Saccharium larvae that can infect another person again. So in short, these are the common waterborne diseases that are caused by bacteria, viruses, and parasites in man. And this ends the first part of this particular course. In the second part, we'll try to look at the treatment process, sewage treatment, wastewater and sewage treatment process to take care of most of these important pathogenic organisms. Thank you. I wish you good luck.